So let's start with you didn't really start writing songs until you moved to New York after art school. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, it's a little blurry, but yeah, around the time that I moved to New York, originally I moved to New York to um, as a visual artist, just getting out of art school, and music was always something I did just for fun. I would play jam with friends, um, usually just improvisational kind of noise. I wasn't even really like thinking about song or song structure or anything like that. And then I think the fact that I didn't have other people to play with, and I had this nylon guitar. I played before that. Um, when I started playing music, I was playing bass only. I didn't even play guitar. And then when I didn't have my friends to play with, I just had a guitar. I started learning some chords. Just sort of went from there.
And I mean, in that period, was it true that you'd barely gotten into the Beatles at that point?
Yeah, I had to sort of re-engineer my listening
Mhm.
towards songwriters. Before that, I think like when I first started playing music, I mean, at first, um, via skateboarding when I was like, in my early teens, I was like punk rock because that was what accompanied a lot of the skateboard movies I was watching and stuff. Um, and then as I became more of a um, discerning listener, that kind of moved into like fusion, jazz fusion. I think I was like interested in just like sick musicianship, and then that kind of morphed into more, um, I guess, away from fusion into more straight jazz. And then I was kind of just primarily listening to instrumental jazz music for a long time and more experimental stuff. And then, yeah, when I started playing guitar and singing, then I had to kind of go back to the beginning
Mhm.
of songwriting and kind of re-educate myself. And the Beatles were an easy choice, and David Bowie was another formative person for me. Dylan, different people for different reasons.
Sure. And in particular, Hunky Dory had an effect on you. Is that
Yeah,
what
yeah.
what elements of songwriting like were you really digging into or were you studying?
Um, he had that Bowie, similarly with the Beatles. They always have the little curveball
Mhm.
in their songs, that sort of melodic twist that gives it that depth.
Yeah.
Um, and I think I really appreciated the kind of like the extraordinary choruses on like Life on Mars. It's
Mhm.
that kind of like epic dy- dynamism of those songs. I think I really appreciated, and also like kind of angst. There's a slight punk rock angst with Bowie that I heard coming through. But I think him, it was similar with my interest in Bowie, and in particular with that record, was similar with my interest in the Beatles, in what he was doing with songs.
So then theory wise, was there an actual, were you looking at chord structures? Were you looking at forms? Or was it just purely ingesting this music?
I was
Listening.
trying to figure it out, pretty rudimentary back then. It was just like, novel to like hear someone go from a minor to a major kind
Mhm.
of like resolution. That was enough to like perk my ear. Um, so yeah, I was just kind of listening, and I never spent much time learning. I've never played that many covers. Occasionally I'll hear something that'll really strike me and I'll learn it and perform it, but
Mhm.
um, I would just sort of absorb it through kind of osmosis, I guess, just listening and then like trying to write a song like that. Even and back then, I'm still self-taught musician, but at this point I've learned stuff through just doing it for
Mhm.
so long and playing with a lot of musicians that are a lot better than me,
Mhm.
theory wise, and sort of absorbing that over time. But back then I really had no idea, um, why something sounded the way it did,
Yeah.
whether, is it was that I didn't know why, like why something had like a suspended feeling. Also was kind of like absorbing the feel of it and trying to see if I could like just take a stab in the dark and make it feel the same way.
Mhm.
Um, and I don't think that I necessarily was successful, but I would always, I think, trying to reach for something that was unattainable for me, I would end up in another place that was also interesting to me
Mhm.
um, at the time. I mean, I look back on those me kind of like fishing for my style or whatever back then, and it's pretty cringeworthy, like listening to a lot of that early stuff, but it was necessary.
Which, I mean, we talked about the Beatles and then David Bowie, but there was a quote where you said, you had to teach yourself the whole canon of songwriters, right? So which other songwriters were you looking at that point?
Um, well, at that point, I remember listening to Bill Fay, like
Hmm.
English songwriter from the '60s.
Yep.
Um, I kind of got, Dylan was pretty big for a different reason. I think I was like Dylan and Neil Young,
Hmm.
these are all the big guys, but I was like working with a really wide lens, back then and just trying to, and I think they're important for a good reason, and
Yeah.
for me, it was like um, the Beatles sort of represented a structural songwriting, structural approach,
Yeah.
um, particularly Paul McCartney,
Definitely.
um, like a nuts and bolts, like masterclass in songwriting.
Yeah.
And then Dylan and Neil are kind of like a feeling, a raw kind of expression,
Hmm.
um, and a sound, like the sound. Remember the sound of Dylan's guitar, the sound of his pick,
Hmm.
particular like the size of guitar he was using. I don't know. I think double O or some early stuff is kind of more of a parlor.
Yeah. Hmm.
He would play sort of back on the bridge. It sounded like there was certain things that I would latch onto that I would kind of obsess over.
Yeah.
Rhythm stuff, Dylan's rhythm, in particular, that I see going back into blues music and then even into a lot of African stuff. I hear a lot of that in Dylan's picking and his sense of rhythm and his sense of phrasing.
Hmm.
Um, I followed him into like Lou Reed,
Yeah.
which was another, probably is my favorite songwriter, really, when it comes down to it.
Hmm.
He's like my white bread, like the sort of filler, like that's a bad analogy because white bread's not good for you, but he's like a very substantial figure for me. He touches a lot of different places and satisfies me in a lot of different places at once.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, those guys started to get into Captain Beefheart
Oh
back
yeah.
then because he kind of like bridged a lot of those worlds together. Still really into that stuff. Um, yeah.
Speaking of influences, you got introduced to Arthur Russell around the self-titled. album. What kind of, looking back on that album now, are you able to see that influence in certain songs or your writing?
Hmm. Yeah. Um, Definitely. I think I was looking for um, this kind of linear feeling
Hmm.
um, that he has, like more of a textural, circular kind of feeling.
Hmm.
Working on that first record, I was like, okay, like I'm gonna go on just a feel. I'm gonna write a very simple progression.
Hmm.
I'm gonna make sure it feels good. I'm gonna go on that feeling. I'm not gonna put too much importance into lyrics. I'm gonna let the lyrics be pretty abstract.
Hmm.
Um, I'm not gonna second guess myself. I'm not gonna I'm gonna let mistakes sort of sit there, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna like actually use them as springboards to go in other directions. Things I was assuming Arthur is doing.
I see. So it seems like then influence or inspiration seems to take a form of maybe more of a mentality rather than like actual structures or chords or style. Would that, does that seem
For
fair?
me, yeah. Sometimes I try to go back to the drawing board and like I'll like sit and try to learn. There's some stuff like Joe Beam or something where I'll like it's like again it's like a master class
Mhm.
in like or um what's his name Gilberto. I always forget that Gilberto Gil and João Gilberto. Yeah,
Mhm. Yeah.
the João the Gilberto, right? That's the original bossa dude.
Yep.
That stuff I'll just try to learn just to sort of get some of these like passing chords under my belt and like kind of have more of a repertoire.
Mhm.
um, Sometimes I'll kind of listen to some African music and figure out what they're doing polyrhythmically and try to figure that out, a little bit.
Mhm.
I never go too deep. I kind of feel like I should be more of a student in that way, but you know it's like I just take a lot of little things. I'll go sort of deep in a lot of different areas and just kind of then go a certain distance and then have a little bit more of a tool bag to work from when I start another project.
Is it intentional when you're sitting down and like figuring these things out, or do you just find yourself picking up the guitar out of listening? Um,
Yeah, um, I'm ashamed to admit it, but I realized recently that um, this is I probably shouldn't be airing this out there, but I have a competitiveness I kind of realizing recently that sometimes I'll get influenced by something I'll hear that I'll kind of like, but I'll feel like I can do a better job. Here's something I'll be like, okay, that's cool. I can do a better job at that, and
mhm.
and then it'll inspire me to try to do that instantly. Like I'll hear like one bar of a song and
Mhm.
I'll be like, oh, I got this. And I'll shut it off and like go write a song really quickly.
Yeah.
Whether it's better or not, I don't know. But I noticed that I don't think I was aware of that process before recently. Um, if a lot of times, like if it can be a curse, as a young songwriter, like listening to the Beatles, it's like, what the hell, what are you going to do? You're going to try to write, you're going to try to outdo the Beatles. I mean, you're going to try to outdo Joe Beam. It's like, what the hell, you drive yourself completely insane.
Right.
So sometimes it's like lowering my bar is easier. um, that's and the same applies to someone like Lou Reed. Although he's not always on pitch, his songs are incredibly simple. It's basically 1-4-5 the whole time.
Mhm.
It's the same song, just like twisted and turned into different versions of the same thing over and over again. But I can't, if I try to do a Lou Reed, if I try to do an Arthur Russell, it's like I'll never accomplish that. And again, it's like It's just you've got to sort of you've got to find out what it is that you do, you know. Um, I can get stressed out sometimes listening to certain stuff and be like, oh, like that's some real songwriting right there. You know? But then like I'll go, you know, I'll go to Arthur and I'll listen to some of his more ambient, just cello stuff, or I'll go to Lou Reed and I'll be like, okay, there's a million ways to do this and it's all good. And, you know,
Yeah. Musically speaking, I saw that there was an intent with Here You Go Magic to not ever really lean on the third.
yeah.
And in retrospect, with I think it was Good Mood Fool, you wanted to lean on the third alternatively, or like show that there was a key, right? Is that accurate?
Yeah, I think we were always going for that suspended. Um, more it was in between minor major. That's the vibe that I think Here You Go Magic was always looking for. So it was always kind of a sus feeling in that music. Um, I think that's more accurate for that. And then with B small, yeah, I was like listening to that Wrong Way Up. It was like, or listening a lot of that stuff kind of reminds me of African music.
Hmm.
Um, like more sort of like sub-Saharan African, like more that kind of like very overtly major, always one, like Sukus music or something, Congolese music, always 145, always just very major, just unapologetically joyful.
Yeah.
And that after like always going for that kind of like, Here We Go Magic was really influenced by a lot of krautrock, Noi in particular,
Sure.
which always has that kind of suspended feeling. Um, uh, yeah, then I was like, man, I just want to just like land, you know? So it's just reactions, right? Um, yeah.
Is there a routine for you that seems to work, that produces content that you like, or?
Yeah. Yeah. If I'm not in it now, I'm in a visual art phase. They don't really usually go together. They can't go together because I'm sort of obsessive in that way. But um, and okay, so the routine kind of leads me into why it can be sort of unhealthy for me, is that
Mhm.
when I'm in songwriting zone, it's just like I'll well, for one, if I get to it early, right when I wake up, I have coffee. Usually sit in bed
Mhm.
with coffee, and I'll write from right before like too many things get going in my head. I'll start.
Mhm.
And if I get into traffic early enough, then I'll just stay there the whole day. I'll just write all day, and usually I'll write an idea. I try to move pretty quickly. I'll have a simple sketch, then I'll start recording. And recording and writing are synonymous for me. They just happen at the same time. A lot of times, like I put a drum beat. I'll have an idea for a song on guitar, but then once I put a drum beat down or a bass line, it'll move it in a different direction. I'll
Mhm.
just maybe end up saving one part of it. However it works. I mean, it usually changes. Very, very rarely does it stay um, true to the way I wrote it originally, for
Right.
better or for worse. Sometimes I think I need to just kind of like first thought, best thought, but whatever. I'm always changing. It's just the way it goes. I need to work quickly and I need to work consistently, or the fact that I change so much, if I stay with something too long, it's just unintelligible
Yeah.
a day away, and then who knows if I just like sacrifice something really great, like so like work in the morning, um, then work all day. I think the unhealthy part of that is that sometimes it can be at the expense of like eating, like remembering to eat, going outside, you
Yeah.
know, being social, like all those things, um, and then typically I'll eat later in the day, um, and then maybe try to get out for a little while, And then the really unhealthy part is I I get in this this is another thing I probably shouldn't admit, but later at night I'll drink wine and smoke weed and like listen to what I recorded, and I
Hmm.
get in this cycle where it's not crazy, but it's like consistent. If I when I get in that space, I'll just want to do that every night, you know. I'll have a few glasses of wine, I'll smoke weed, and I'll like listen to what I did and like see if it works or not. And it's a pretty good litmus test for me. Like marijuana is like a kind of a good, it's a good way for me to see if something works or doesn't. It's but it's not a good time for me to actually work. That's what I've realized.
Hmm.
It's a good time for listening. It's not a good time for working.
Hmm.
Um, and that, but that kind of pattern is just playing itself out for me. As I get older, I just don't want to do that anymore. It takes its toll, you know, the
Yeah.
obsessiveness all day long working. Then I was like, I'm just going to get up and I'm going to record. I'm going to record for an hour in the morning, whatever happens, um, and just put it in a folder and leave it.
Hmm.
So I was doing that, and that felt really good. Um,
Artists need, they have their cocktail, something that allows them to create and express. And from what you're saying, it seems like what writing in the morning before any thoughts cloud, what it is when you're, sipping wine, listening back to the music, you are trying to remove a filter in a sense. You want to try to view it as objectively as possible. Is that true?
yeah, yeah. You want to get to that place before the demons show up. You know,
Right.
you kind of gotta want to sneak in before they notice that anyone's there. You know, that's definitely what it is. You're always trying to sort of trick yourself um, into that innocence. Because without that, you know, that innocence and that that is what sort of cross pollinates across. That's what makes, you know, someone like Chicoria amazing, as well as someone like Daniel Johnston. You
Hmm.
know,
Yep.
it's just that love, you know, for a lack of a better word. I mean, it's just like love for what you're doing.
Yeah.
And you know, love is free of judgment. That, you know, so the first Here We Go Magic record, it's like i was i was I was, I had a solo career before that, and I was really trying my very best for a long, what it felt like a long time. At that point it was only a few years, but I
Mhm.
was really beating my head against the wall for any kind of interest. um, just playing way more local shows than I probably should have been, and not being able to get any industry interest in any way, label, manager, booking agent, whatever. Um, and I quit. I decided I was going to quit as a career musician. I was just going to stop, and I was going to like figure out what I wanted to do.
Mhm.
And I did it in a way that felt really joyful. Actually, I wasn't something broke in me, and I was like, I don't give a shit. And then I was free, and all of a sudden, um, this record just kind of came out of me in this really joyful way. I was like, and I was doing it for myself completely.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, you know, that's the first record that people sort of gravitated to, you
Mm.
know. So, you know, that's that threading that, walking that line, you know, like um obviously, like if that record was just, there's one side of that record that's like just noise, kind of ambient. If the whole record was like that, it wouldn't have done what it did, you know. That's clear. So it really, you know, you could just be like a noise artist,
Yeah.
um, and you can love it and have the same sort of innocence, and you know, it's not necessarily going to like go over commercially, you know. So there's a lot of things. There's a lot of like, you know, leveraging, but I think that like my propensity towards sort of being concerned about my work in the public sphere and in the marketplace is just something I've got to deal with in myself, you know. um,
Do you find you're more productive working solo or collaborating?
um, that's an interesting topic because I would have had a different answer last year, even, right? I mean, COVID has
Right.
happened. Um, I think I've always been like striving, especially when I was in Here I Go Magic full time and we were on tour perpetually for, 3 years, um, 3 years, maybe more. I don't even remember, but we were constantly on tour, always around people. I was always around people. And I was like always craving to be alone and to work alone.
Mhm.
And when that band dissolved, that's what I did. I just went into like isolation, and life would pull me out of it a lot. And I would make music, and then I would need other musicians to play with to perform it, and so I would tour and rehearse, and I love that. But then I would always like be looking forward to getting back to what I really love doing, which is recording solo at home. Um, uh, but what I realized since COVID is I don't even have the option to play with other people, really. A couple times I have social distance outside, but really I haven't been playing with people and around people at all in the same way that I was pre-COVID. And I realize how important that is.
Yeah.
It's nutrients, to play with other people. It's very important. So now, I'm seeing that like it can't. I end up sort of cannibalizing myself. Like I'm just like, if I'm always working alone, I need that springboard. And um, the last couple of years, I've been getting more into production, working with other artists on their stuff, not collaborate. I mean, collaborating in a sense that I'm like helping them with their vision, but
Mhm.
that's been really great for me. I found that like after working with another artist for a couple of weeks, I'll come back home. Usually I travel to do that. So I'm going into a different space entirely with a different community of people. Then I'll come back and I'll be filled with inspiration. If it's an artist that is inspiring to me,
Right.
and I'll kind of go, have like a flurry of writing after that.
Mhm.
And then I'll be like, okay, it's time to hunker down and kind of like really define this stuff. And then if I spend too much time eventually alone, it'll start to just like, I'll just end up like wanting to throw everything away. Um, and then I think, before pre-COVID, before that would be able to happen, I'd inevitably go away somewhere, tour or work with another. And so I would stave off getting to that point where I would just want to like throw everything away.
Yeah.
And that's kind of happen. I'm throwing stuff away now. Because I'm just only in my own head, and it's not, I don't think it's inevitably that can't be the only thing. I need both.
Yeah. Okay. So it's a balance of.
It's
I,
a balance. I think more alone is good for me,
Mhm.
but it needs to be peppered with um, the world at large.
Mhm. Speaking of production, Jen, your bassist, well, ex-bassist from Hero Go Magic, produced Pigeons, right?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
she
for.
did. I mean, we all did. We all did. I think she engineered it.
Mhm.
Um, she engineered it more than the rest for sure. And Jen is like the one of the top three musicians I've ever played with. I mean, she's just insane.
Mhm.
She's like she always has the right thing to play. And so, she'd always just kind of subvert any song that I wrote. She would kind of just like she'd subvert it and just bring it like 1,000 rungs higher
Mhm.
with what she added, whether on any instrument, um, bass, but her vocal harmony arrangements, guitar stuff, keyboards, rhythmic ideas, whatever. I mean, she's just amazing. She's just better than she even knows, you know.
Hmm.
So in that respect, she did produce it because she would lean things in really strong directions
Hmm.
based on what she would do, you know. She just dropped bombs all over the place. That's just like, she's just insane. Um, yeah.
And then for Good Mood Fool, you worked with Mike Johnson of Dirty Projectors.
Yeah, he played drums on that. Yeah, he came up
Sure.
and put down, I think, all the drums on that. I think all the drums are him. Yeah, yeah,
And obviously Nigel Godrich for A Different Ship.
yeah.
How do you find the relationship is when someone's producing you versus the opposite?
I like it. I haven't done it in a long time.
Hmm.
Um, you know, Nigel was the only one that was like proper producer in the house. You know, I mean, Jen was like, I think we were like there was a democratic decision that was made at the end that made sense, that everyone agreed on, that she was the producer of it. But it was like we were a band and we were making decisions together. So it's
Hmm.
more of a nuanced thing. Um, but Nigel was a proper, you know, guy that came in from the outside
Hmm.
and produced us. Um, Although even Nigel's a nuts and bolts guy. I mean, he's really like, he's like a master engineer with impeccable taste, you
Definitely.
know.
Yeah.
Different than an Eno, you know. Like I think Eno is like, you know, a quintessential producer in that he's not like a terribly, I don't know how adept he is as an engineer, or you know what, or as a musician. Really, he's just an idea guy.
Hmm.
um, Nigel has that, but he also is just like, you know, a consummate engineer,
Hmm.
um, kind of old school, like Abbey Road lab coat type kind of engineer guy. So, and that was really, really, you know, aside from him just being like pretty square about his opinions on songs, like, um, you know, he would just tell me straight up, like, that one's shit. That one's good. That one's okay. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
and it was like kind of a tough pill to swallow, but really helpful.
Mhm.
Um, and then we didn't have to sort of like bicker between five of us about songs. You know, it's like he kind of made those decisions
Mhm.
mo- for the most part, which was really, really helpful. Kind of trimmed the fat right away.
Yeah.
Um, and then also his adeptness at engineering was just so helpful, because everything was always like sounded so great and was just so ready to go
Mhm.
that, you know, there was, you know, a lot of times in studios, it's just like just waiting,
Yep.
you know.
Mhm.
Drum sounds take a whole friggin' day, you know, just to get the rhythm section happening. And it's really hard to avoid that. I mean, I'm always Nigel. It was just set up like the second we walked in. I mean, he has his things, you know. He's got his sound,
Right.
and he kind of laid that on top of us pretty effectively. And then I think we sort of brought the rest to it, like in terms of just the way we played. And then he sort of like um, adapted to us, and he had a really cool way of recording everything that we did, whether we realized it or not, and then had this whole sound bank of like this whole folder of like just sort of ambient, us figuring out synth patches, us talking, like tuning up whatever, and then had that whole sort of like bank of sounds that he would like then augment and pitch shift and stretch and lay in other songs, and just did all this crazy shit. Moved really quickly. Um, he worked in a way that you didn't see him do anything. It was like he was just like walking around the room, and you were like so fast, and just everything was just set up. It was like, you know,
Mhm.
um, I don't remember any time something not. One time he left for a day and his assistant worked with us, and we broke an MS-20, a Korg,
Mhm.
which was like a vintage one that he got from Japan.
Ugh.
It was like, you know, a $15,000 synthesizer, and we broke it. And his um his assistant was like aghast, like thought that, you know, but Nigel came back and was like, no big deal, took the thing into his little room and just like fixed it within like, it was like 15 minutes, like
Wow.
resoldered it, got it working, brought it back in, plugged it in, everything was, it was like just, I don't know, he's got this like this crazy touch, you know.
Is there a song you can point to that you think he really heavily influenced in the direction or production?
um I mean, they're all pretty equal.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's hard to say. What did he do? Um, he did a lot of cool shit on I Believe in Action.
Mhm.
A lot of the sort of end sort of synth kind of shit is him just kind of like taking random sounds and doing stuff. Um, Over the Ocean, it's a lot of sort of ambient stuff that was really cool.
Yeah.
Uh, the title track, the end of it, I remember he did a lot of cool stuff. They all, I mean, all of them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Even stuff that he didn't really add a lot to, he just recorded so well. The
Yeah.
way things are sitting, the
Yeah.
fidelity of it, it's just it's like an instrument, you know, it's just like, um, it's hi-fi, but it's also dark. It's like it's not super bright. It's like that really nice kind of, I guess it's like 70s hi-fi or whatever, you know, it's like the way hi-fi was, you know, exemplified by Fleetwood Mac or something. But it has a modern kind of beefiness to it that a Fleetwood Mac record doesn't have. It has like a kind of a heaviness that feels more modern.
Right.
Um, yeah.
So then would you say that the for the most part the songwriting aspect he left or like didn't really touch? There was no songs where he
Yeah,
said, hey, that section.
not so much. I think maybe a couple times, but I can't really remember
Mhm.
specifics. But no, he's kind of stayed out of it.
Mhm.
He would just tell me if he thought something was good or not, you know. And
Right.
a lot of times he would like, I'd be like, you know, halfway through the third word and he'd be like, that's good. He would just know.
Yeah. I read
Yeah.
that one thing you took away from him was not to be too precious, to like seize inspiration right when it happens.
Yeah.
Were there what other like musical wisdom or things did you really walk away from that session with?
Mm, um, I don't, I think that, and I still forget this, it's like something's good. If something's good, it's good. Like don't sweat the style of it or you know, I feel like Nigel as a producer is just like, that's a good song. That sounds great. Like don't overthink it. Like it's good for what it is within its own sphere. Like you don't have to be, you know, I mean, of course I was like, you know, had an inferiority complex at first working with him,
Yeah.
thinking like, I'm sure you'd rather I be Tom right now. You know, like, so whatever. But it's like I'm me within my own world of good and bad. You know, see, either I work within myself or I don't. You know, that's I think Nigel kind of was seeing us as that. You know, he wasn't expecting we're like Radiohead. You know, I mean, it was like the ultimate watermark, like up against the ultimate watermark working with him. You
Mhm.
know, and so I kind of was like, oh, he sees the value in us for who we are. You know, I took that from him. You know, yeah.
But how does what is your role then as a producer where it's not your music? Like, how do you fill that niche?
It really depends on what they want from me. And I've done uh, I've done some production where I just play all the instruments in my little studio, where someone comes and like this girl Emily Ritz, that's kind of releasing something now that I produced, where she just had some some songs that she wrote on guitar and some kind of just a cappella, and
Mm,
I just wrote and wrote the arrangements and got all the sounds and stuff. And then there's, you know, sometimes where I'm more just sort of the mentor in the room, just kind of like the cheerleader. I always play to some on stuff that I work on, like some more than others. Adrienne, that I played quite a bit of stuff, like synth stuff and some
mm,
subtle rhythmic stuff. Um, it really depends. It's a case by case thing, you know, whatever someone wants or
mm.
whatever someone needs, you know. I'm open to helping someone figure out their direction if they want, you know, like taking more of a role. Um, Sometimes it's like someone will be wanting direction, but I'll be there to tell them that they don't really need any other direction than where they're already going, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, yes, you're capable of doing many things as a producer. Which would you say are your true strengths? Like, what, in spite of whatever they may want, what are you bringing to the table every single time?
Um, I think I'm good. I'm a music guy,
Hmm.
like first and foremost. So I think I'm good if a song feels like it could use a little bit of color somewhere, whether it's the arrangement or if it's just um, like sort of rewriting a certain part or adding like that sort of subversive kind of moment harmonically or melodically. Like I think that's what I'm best at. I'm
Yeah.
not much of a technical guy, you know, like I don't really have a full breadth of understanding about synthesis or, you know, like um, mic placement and, you know, I'm pretty rudimentary. I mean, I do that stuff. I wouldn't trust myself to like engineer properly. I mean, I could make something sound cool, you know, and vibey, but I'm not like I don't have a full spectrum of ability in terms of engineering. So more of a music guy. And I think that like I'm very critical of myself, but I tend not to be as critical of other people in that if I like what they do, I'm 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 good at sort of letting them see what's, you know, like if people are like, oh, like it's just is this too singer songwritery or is this too whatever, you know, I think where I would maybe be similarly judgmental of myself, I'm it's, you know, I should take my own advice kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, one thing I'd like to do is ask you about particular songs, and if you could just give maybe a little anecdote of how they came about or what you remember about writing them. That sounds good.
Sure.
Surprise off Pigeons.
Um, what did I? That was like inspired by the Pixies.
Hmm.
Doolittle, that record. I can't remember what song, but that kind of vibe, that like one line,
Mhm.
kind of moving through, sort of like stranger chord sequence, and that sort of space and darkness of like just the line, the bass and the drums kind of vibe, and
Yeah.
slowly getting filled in as time goes on. And I think that tempo is kind of like a tempo that I would hear on that record.
Hmm. I mean, you're definitely alluding to the part, two-way part that is my favorite in that song, but in the mid section where it kind of switches, there's just a lone guitar. It's
Hmm.
very reminiscent tone-wise of Grizzly Bear. Tonal, I mean, harmonically, it's very reminiscent of Radiohead, even
Mhm,
the way it shifts and everything.
mhm.
Um, were there other influences like that that you were thinking of, or was it purely
I
Pixies?
can't. That's the one that that was written so long ago. But that's the one that the Pixies was the one that pops out. But I'm sure it Grizzly. I mean, all those bands were all sort of swarming around the ether during that time. So I'm sure that was in there. I really loved Yellow House. That I think that was during the time, and they had before they had released Vaketamist. Yellow House was swarming around my head during
Hmm.
that time. So I'm sure that that got in there.
Hmm. How about Empty Promises off both hands?
Um, I think Milton Nascimento,
Mm.
Brazilian guy, was listening to him.
Who
That,
else is singing on that song?
me, it's just me. It's just pitch shifted.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow, that's
yeah,
very impressive.
yeah,
I honestly, I don't know if you've heard of Aldous Harding.
yeah.
I thought it was her.
Oh, really?
I was
Oh
scouring
shit.
for credits and I was like, there's something about, yeah, the way that the
That
singing
would have, if Aldous Harding was on that song, that record would have gotten a lot more
is,
attention, I think.
I
She's
was,
amazing. I love her stuff, man.
yeah. Well, I mean, you pulled it off, so that's incredible. Um,
Thanks.
Ideal Drama.
Um, this guy John Bapp.
Hmm.
He's this guy who was in Houston, kind of outsider R&B dude. Really fucking cool. Now he's living in LA. I don't know what he's doing, but I was listening to him, and he's just kind of this like sort of new futuristic R&B dude. Like has a lot of sort of broken kind of Dilla beats, um, and very sort of left of field production, kind of very dense.
Mhm.
Um, I don't know. It was a spring off of that, and then it ended up its own thing. But I think I was like I like the density of it, and I like how deep and low and present the vocal is. It's
Yeah.
like a sound thing. Yeah.
How did you start writing that song? Because the chord progression itself alone is very, I love the chord progression for it. I mean, it's,
It just came. I was playing guitar. It was just a guitar progression. If I remember, it's just like a half step basically,
mhm,
but major to major half step kind
mhm,
of vibe. I think if I can remember, it's like a B flat major seven to like an A major seven kind of is like the main, and then it resolves to like an E major.
mhm,
So it's just that rather than it being like B A E, it's like B flat. That B flat is like the sort of money note, and the the major seven shares the A with the A. So yeah, it's just that, just working off that kind of vibe. I might be, yeah, I think that's the progression. There might be a capo on there somewhere. I can't remember. And I definitely pitched it. So it's probably not true to those
mhm.
chords, but
Do you typically, I mean, is guitar your go-to for writing?
yeah, but yeah, yeah. I try to make keys more,
Mhm.
um, or I go in and out. I feel like I come up with or I think that I come up with more interesting progressions on keys, but then I learned it on guitar, and I'm like, oh, that's just the same shit I do on guitar. But I think I hear it different because it's on a different instrument.
So then your thought process is to, get the progression down guitar-wise and then just transfer to synth?
Yeah, yeah. For the Art Feynman stuff, for sure. That was I think there's guitar on that though.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, there's guitar. There's direct electric. I was just kind of strumming. And I remember that was like I was like shang shang, shang like wanting it, wanting the strumming to be a real integral part
Mhm.
of that the vibe of that song.
I actually did want to hit on the guitar because there's some incredible soloing on it. Like Feeling Good About Feeling Good, that last section, and that's you, right?
Yeah.
I haven't heard anything else that you've done that has that kind of soloing on it, unless I'm missing
Mm.
something. But what led you to like unleash this almost shredder? I don't know. It's really really
Yeah. It's like, I don't know, man. I mean, it's something I've always done, especially with Here We Go Magic. Like we would in rehearsal kind of like rip out solos here and there, but like everyone is always like, okay, cool, all right. And they'd give me like maybe like 30 seconds and then I'd kind of get laughed out of it, you know. It's like a taboo thing, you know, like a blues solo. But, you know, it's like I love that shit if it's done in the right context.
yeah.
African music, you know, like psychedelic African music kind of like is the context I think where that kind of stuff really like works for me. And I think that first Art Feynman record was really influenced by um, African music, which now it's funny. It's like I feel like that's like really inappropriate appropriation at this point. Like we've changed so much as a culture. I I don't think I would do that now. Like you know, I don't know. I mean, it's I don't know what, you know, that's a complicated topic, but at any rate, at that time, it was like I was like, you know, trying to just get this sort of fuzzy sound that like, you know, I'd hear in some like psychedelic African stuff that I'd hear. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I just have that it's like I got a couple little chops, you know, like I pretty much spent them all on those solos, you know. And there's some smoke and mirrors there. I mean, I would do a bunch of passes and I'd edit the best parts, you know.
Mhm.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think you nailed it. And it makes sense you're bringing up the African music, but like I don't know if you've heard the polyrhythmo orchestra, like
Mm.
the Ethiopian type
Oh
recordings.
yeah, 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 yeah.
There's a purity there to their soloing, to their
Oh
tone.
yeah,
That's
crazy.
not like proud of itself.
Yeah.
And that's what I got
It
out of
just feel it just, you know, that expression of bending notes up into things that sort of, I guess, that comes from kind of, you know, more microtonal Eastern approaches to music, you know, whether it be African or Asian or Middle Eastern or whatever, like that kind of sense of things sort of like merging,
it.
always merging, you know, they're based on coming from instruments without frets,
Yeah.
you know, for the most part, you know, and and coming from replicating the human voice. I mean, that's not a, you know, white or black thing. That speaks to something deep in the human soul. I think is because it's a vocal. It's like a way of playing your instrument like a voice. You know, like you're speaking. That 1-4-5 progression is like inexhaustible
Yep.
if it's done in the right way. If it's done with that innocence and that purity for just, you know, going to the 4 feels good
Mm-hmm.
for a reason, you know. It just does. It's like and I'm always trying to kind of like go I'm kind of going off just the topic of the blues guitar solo, but I mean, I'm always trying to sort of like get back to like that
Mm-hmm.
as far as I'll go off into other directions,
Yeah.
trying to come up with like crazier progressions that and push the limits of that as far as I can go with it remaining pop music, you know, and feeling good, you know.
Yeah.
But how if you can make a 1-4-5 sing and feel like prescient and good and current, then that's like always the goal for me. Yeah.
Do you have any like favorite synths you're using right now?
Um, man, I don't, well, I have a JP, wait, JX3P that I got, which is okay. I like it all right.
Mhm.
Um, and I got this synth um, bundle package, soft synth, of all like the famous analog synths, and
Mm.
it sounds amazing. I mean, it sounds really good. It like it's hard to tell the difference, you know. And I've been just using, you know, it's just got like all the modular synths, and like it's got a buchla on there, and you know, like synthy and all this shit. But
Mhm.
I end up going back to this. I got this Yamaha, cheap ass Yamaha thing that was made in like 2017. It's like a home keyboard that has like drum sounds, and you know, it's like I guess it's kind of sample based. It's got like you know, all the string sounds, all the horn sounds. You know, it's just like this, like a it's like the new version of like a cheap Casio from the 80s or something. But it's just the thing that I always use. It's so easy. It's like it's like augmentable enough with some effects and stuff that it sounds kind of cool. I made the whole last Art Feynman record with it.
Oh,
Like
wow.
it's all that. It's just simple. I like to work fast. I don't really like to like spend too much time um, looking for sounds and making sounds perfect. I maybe should be better at it, you know, but yeah, I just usually use this Yamaha.
Wow. And it's is it just a generic model, or is there like a is it like a
Yeah,
yellow?
it's like they name it so you can never even remember. Like it's PSR E453.
Hmm, interesting. All right.
Yeah, it's like you'd probably, if you ever go into a Guitar Center, they're not even showcased in the synth section. They're just like in a box like above. I
Yeah.
like was on a tour, and I was doing an Art Feynman tour with Letitia Sadye, the
Yeah.
Stereolab
Mhm.
woman, and I was playing. I just had like a drum machine in my guitar, and I was like playing that way, and then I was like, I need some keys.
Mhm.
And so in between one of the shows, I went to a Guitar Center, and I just got this thing for $300,
Mhm.
and it's great, man. So many drum sounds in there that sound great. Like, you know, I run them through a good pre and compressor, like beef them up, they sound good.
Well, I don't want to take up too much more of your time, but I want to round it out actually with recent posts I saw on your Instagram. Um, one of them being that you actually prefer listening to music that does all the things that you don't let yourself do.
Yeah, that's like the ambient shit that I was telling you about.
So, but I mean, it seems like you're letting yourself do it, right? So,
I'm trying.
what makes you say that you don't let yourself do it,
Um,
musically speaking?
I'm trying to think of an example. Like you know, um, I'll make something. I'll make like an ambient piece, and then it'll be done in like, you know, 15 minutes, and I'll be like, oh, I can't stop there. Like like, you know, I got like, what is it if it's not some sort of struggle, and like I need to like come up with a melody line over top, right? And then the melody line at first is like instrumental, but then I'm like, oh, but I should say something like, and then I'll end up singing it, and then I'll, you know, it's like I won't kind of like let myself just sort of do. I have these ideas about what it is to like work on something and struggle through it, and how many hours is equated with something being good, blah blah blah, stuff like that, you know, like not letting myself just be. um, but I find that um, a lot of music, or like, you know, feeling like I need to like work to a click, so things are like have like a metronomic perfection to them, but then like I'll listen to music that is all over the place,
Mhm.
um, in terms of its tempo, and I'll be like really sweating, like, you know, my vocals, and you know, but then I'll listen to shit that it's like sharp and flat all over the place, you know.
Mhm.
um songs where, like I'll be like, oh, like I can't stay on this section for too long. People get bored. But then like, I listen to like drony music that's just like the same thing for like half an hour, and I'm perfectly happy to listen to it. It's shit like that.
That's touches on the second aspect of that post where you said, the kind of music you make is not the kind you ever listen to except when you're making it. What went into that thought?
Well, just that. I mean, well, that I said that in a moment too.
Hmm.
So I do make music that I'm training myself. I'm working at making music that I want to listen to, and I do make some that I want to listen to for sure, and I always have. I think more what I meant was like I was in that moment I was writing songs for this Cascading Moms project,
Hmm.
and I don't listen to songwriters these days. I never do. I never want to put it on. I never want to put on. Occasionally I do. Um, like I think recently I listened to like some Fairport Convention, but it's more like a sound. I'm not like getting into songwriting. If I ever listen to songwriters, it's not because of the songwriting. It's like because of some other, it's because of it's because of the whole thing. It's like the sound of it, the the emotion that it's bringing. It's not really the nuts and bolts of the structure of the song. I mean, it's all holistic, and that's the structure of the song is definitely part of it, but it's like there's proof that I like so many disparate things that it's proof that there is no one way to do it. But I have these like rules for myself when I go to write a song. That's the thing. It's like I'm like not seeing, I'm not bringing that like enlightenment into my own music. I'm like, oh, I can't do that, or I've got to, blah blah blah. It's like, so that's it. It's just that.
I see. What current music are you obsessing over?
I go back to the same shit. I listen to tons of Brian Eno ambient shit, like Thursday Afternoon, music for airports, music for film, like all that shit. I just love it. Um, I listen to John Hassel, Harold Budd, um, ambient guys, and then I wrote some names down. Let me see. I'll do, like I said, I'll like check this like Japanese ambient stuff out from the 70s and 80s, and I won't pay attention. But there was one, uh, Hiroshi Yashimura.
Hmm.
It's cool, like really really pretty, just like innocent, like sounds like nature.
Yeah.
Ambient stuff. Um, I will listen to um, well, I always go back to the Kraut stuff.
Hmm.
That's like tireless for me. Never get tired of Can, Noi, um, Cluster, Harmonia. I never get tired of that shit. It's just like inexhaustible for me. Um, Particularly, I think the last year or so, like um, Harmonia and Cluster, like those are the most recent krautrock krautrock bands that I got into. They're basically like the same. I think Noi too. There's some crossover with all those guys. Um,
Last question. Knowing what you know now about songwriting and your career, everything that you know now, if you could talk to your that self that we spoke about earlier on when you were learning songwriting, or in general, if you were to impart any sort of wisdom that you know about songwriting now, what would you say?
Play to your weaknesses.
Hmm. What does that mean to you?
Let it stay dumb. Like don't try to be something you're not. Just let yourself be. Like play to your accentuate your strengths within your weaknesses. Like if you can't do something, do stay down where you are, but just try to be as good at that as you can be.
Mhm.
Don't and don't try to reach farther than is comfortable. Like stay where you're at and let yourself sort of move as you will,
Yeah.
like through because you will evolve. You know, I hear myself reaching really far in early stuff, and it's cringeworthy, you know. But at the same time, I needed to be doing that to get to where I am, I guess. I perpetually feel like a beginner. That's the other thing. So, you know, it's like the blind leading the blind in that respect. Like if I was to talk to my earlier self, it's like, but letting myself just be,
Mhm.
finding like what it is to like where my limitations are, and just like limit myself within that framework and just do the best I can there.
Mhm.
If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that sentiment. I think that's great. Well, on that note, I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, man.
I love talking to you. It was really, really fun. And I'll stay in touch about this and let you know when it's
Thanks
coming.
so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great
Yeah,
rest of the weekend.
you too.
All right. I'll see you later.
All right, see you later.